Hello, my name is Scott Rawls, and today we will have a lecture focusing on radioactive material shipments and events that can happen. One event in particular that we will discuss is the Prairie Island Nuclear Generating Plant radioactive material transportation event. Some of the main points for this lecture will be to review lessons learned from this event in particular, discuss risk assessment for radioactive material shipments, and discuss the potential hazards for discrete radioactive particles present in many of shipments like this one right here. Sequence of events for this shipment. On October 23, 2008, a fuel sipping equipment removed from the spent fuel pool, deconned, surveyed, and wrapped. The lid read 120 millirem per hour. Now, class, what type of radiological hazards do we consider, aside from dose rates, do we want to consider when bringing equipment out of the spent fuel pool? Dave. Good answer. Can anyone help Dave? We want to be a little more specific, Dave. How about discrete radioactive particles? Yes. And we'll discuss that later on. October 23rd, 120 millirem per hour lid brought out of the spent fuel pool. One day later, October 24th, 2008, the fuel sipping equipment was loaded into the shipping container, surveyed, and placed on the trailer. Highest dose rate, 170 millirem per hour on the bottom of the container. So now we have 24 hours later, we have an increase in dose rate. October 25th, one day after that, shipping personnel performed characterization of the fuel sipping container. That basically means they wrote up the shipping paperwork, characterized the equipment, and got the package ready to ship. October 29th, Radway shipping coordinator performed confirmatory survey of the container dose rates to verify contact dose rates were in Department of Transportation limits. October 29th, one day later, the shipment leaves Prairie Island Nuclear Power Plant. 24 hours after that, the shipment arrives at the receiving facility in the state of Pennsylvania. On October 30th, that same day, the receiving facility in Pennsylvania performed the initial receipt survey of the vehicle and confirmed the dose rates were within Department of Transportation limits. 24 hours later, shipping container survey was performed by the receiving facility. The package indicated Department of Transportation limits exceeded a small spot on the middle bottom of the container. So, we have a shipment that was packaged and surveyed again, released for shipment, received at the receiving facility, surveyed, all within Department of Transportation limits, and 24 hours after receipt, another survey says that the package has exceeded Department of Transportation limits. 2,000 millirem per hour using a teledetector, which is a Geiger-Müller GM detector. Another detector, an RO2, an ion chamber detector, saw 800 millirem per hour. The state of Pennsylvania and Prairie Island, the nuclear power plant that sent the shipment, were notified. The Region 3 Radiation Protector Inspector for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was notified. And Prairie Island suspended all radioactive shipments pending investigation and corrective actions. On November 3rd, a few days later, the Fleet Radiation Protection Manager and an RP technician from Prairie Island arrive at the receiving facility in Pennsylvania. They confirmed the readings and located a discrete particle on a cable. Now, we discussed that not a few minutes earlier. One of the main radiological hazards when bringing objects out of the spent fuel pool, aside from dose rates, is contamination. And not just regular contamination, contamination with discrete radioactive particles that in themselves have heightened dose rates. Very easy to miss, can get us to exceed regulatory limits down the road if we do miss them. Maximum dose rates that were found by the fleet personnel from Prairie Island, 1,630 milliamp per hour using a Geiger-Müller detector telepole. The shipping container was placed back on the trailer. While on the trailer, they verified the vehicle limits were not exceeded. Readings matched initial transport vehicle survey at Prairie Island. Here's a graph that we've put together, or table, that shows what the dose rates were when the initial survey was performed using ion chamber, telepole. It's ready for shipment, confirmatory survey with a telepole. Upon receipt, all results in compliance with Department of Transportation vehicle limits. All dose rates within limits in the storage area. And then we get into the package gets outside DOT limits, 2,000 milliamp per hour, telepole 800 milliamp per hour, RO2 ion chamber. Prairie Island confirms those surveys do exceed the DOT limits, and the generated effective dose equivalent rate calculation was performed. Are there any questions from the class with what I've discussed so far? Basically, we have a shipment brought out of the spent fuel pool, which we have discussed, heightened risk of discrete radioactive particles. I'll put an initial survey before shipping, within limits. Confirmatory survey, sending it down the road, within limits. Initial receipt, within limits. 1 day later, survey performed, not within limits. Radiation measurements taken at the receiving facility. These readings were reported to the state of Pennsylvania. 2,000 milliamp per hour, GM detector, 800, R2 ion chamber. Now, we talk about teledetector, Geiger-Müller detector, RO2 ion detector. Why? Anyone? We have it right here on the board. Two different types of detectors based on the energy levels of the dose rates will show two different readings. Geiger-Müller measure counts or pulses an approximate dose rate. It's rugged, light, has an audible output. Best to determine the presence of a radiation field. Geiger-Müller, presence of radiation. Maybe not as accurate as the ion chamber. Has a slower response, which means you have to move the meter slower when doing a survey. Used for confirmatory measures. Why? Because it is the most accurate. If you want to know if there is radiation present, but don't really need that much of an accurate response as to how much, Geiger-Müller. If you want the most accurate, ion chamber, but you have to slow your meter down when performing the survey. Having to slow the meter down heightens the risk of human error. Approximation of dose rate, Geiger-Müller, measures true dose, ion chamber. Any questions? Additional reference, Nuclear Regulatory Commission Reg Guide 7.3. Procedures for picking up and receiving packages of radioactive material. CRCPD Echo 5, generic procedures for the inspection of low-level radioactive waste conveyance, packaging, and form. Both documents direct resurvey with more accurate instruments when limits are exceeded. Both documents, so we have regulatory information out there that tells us use the most accurate instrument. Safety significance. Concluded ion chamber measurement was the most accurate assessment of dose rate on the package.